Hey guys, Rick Taylor here with KSUSA. Today we're going to talk about how to service your e30-i and e10-i seat posts. Before we get started, I want to talk a little bit about a couple of tools you're going to need. One is going to be a pair of soft jaws. This is something you can get from either a local hardware store, might have some V-blocks, or you can check with your local bike shop. If you're a dealer looking for these, you might try one of your local distributors. Companies like Park and several others do shop V-block sets that you can use. If you can't find one of these, another option would be to clamp this in the bike service stand. What I'd recommend doing though is to get a scrap piece of inner tube, wrap around here. It'll give you a little bit better grip and prevent any damage or marring on the seat post itself. To make sure we don't over torque this, if you do, you could damage the mast. So get it tight so it doesn't slip, but don't over torque it so you don't cause any damage. Next tool we're going to want to use is a strap wrench. We're going to remove the collar here, the seal collar, and so we'll put the strap wrench around it, unscrew it. Once we get it loose, we can pretty much do the rest by hand. That's the first step. Okay, now we're going to remove the actuator assembly at the bottom of the post. It's a 22mm span. Might be a little bit difficult to find a 22mm wrench at just a standard hardware store. So if you're having trouble finding that, a 7/8 wrench will also work. It's really close to the size and will work fine for this application. When you put this on, you want to make sure that it's flat against the end of the post and that you get a good grip on it so that you don't slip and mar up or damage the actuator. Once it's loose, you can go ahead and unthread it by hand. Okay. Next thing you're going to want to use is we've got a kind of a hand tool here that we made up for this purpose to clamp the shaft on the cartridge. You want to be really careful not to damage this or scratch it, so definitely use either an axle vise, which you can get from a local bike shop, or if you can get a tool similar to this at a hardware store, you can use that. But the main thing is you just don't want to use pliers or anything on this because you could damage the surface. And basically we're going to clamp this by hand. If you're using an axle vise, you'll have to pull the assembly out of the vise, clamp this into the vise, and then unscrew it. But we're going to go ahead and, now that we've got this clamped, we're going to unscrew the actuator. Once that's loose, we can do it by hand. Take this out of the way so you can see this. And we're going to go ahead and take this off. Okay, the actuator rod comes out. We're going to go ahead and set that aside too. Something you want to note, this has a radiused edge here, so it's kind of rounded. This is a square point. The square point is going to go back inside the cartridge this way, and you want to make sure that the rounded edge is on the outside. And we'll talk about that again when we reassemble, but just take note when you take it apart which direction it comes apart. Okay, so we've got the seal collar off. Next thing we're going to do is pull the DU bushing out. Sometimes you can just pull out and it'll pop out just like this with very little force. Other times it might be in there a little tighter and won't pop out so easily. If you slide it a couple times and it's not moving for you, and you see that the DU bushing is starting to pull out or move inside this carrier, stop and don't go any further because you don't want to damage this DU bushing. What you want to do is go ahead and grab a small flathead screwdriver and a mallet and give it a little tap, and that'll knock it loose. So go ahead and put your DU bushing back, and then we're going to pull this out carefully. You notice I'm keeping my hand under it because there's 3 guide bushings at the bottom that you don't want to lose. Okay, so we'll take that out. Our next step is going to be to remove these 3 guide bushings. Let's use a utility knife here, and it's easy to catch the corner and they'll pop right out that way. Just take your time and pop those out. Okay. Next thing we're going to do is kind of check out our DU bushing here. Basically, this should have an easy sliding motion, not much friction, but you shouldn't have any play. If you've got play in it, or if it's excessively sticky and hard to move, you'll want to consider replacing the DU bushing. That's something you can get at your local bike shop. If you're a local dealer or a dealer, you can check with your distributor where you get your KS products, and these are available. Okay, this one feels good, so we're just going to set it aside for now. The next step is to pull off our collar and seal. We'll go ahead and set this assembly aside. Now what we're going to do is go ahead and clean this up. What I'm going to use is a microfiber towel and a biodegradable degreaser. Something like Simple Green works really well. And just going to wipe this clean. Make sure we get any grit or anything out of here. I'm going to flip it around and clean the threaded side as well. Okay, now that we've got it all clean, we can get a good look at it. What we're going to check for is the seal surface here. You should have a good sharp edge to the rubber seal, both the inner and outer lip of the seal. You want to make sure that that is still a clean edge. If it's rounded off or worn, or if you have any cracks or nicks or damages to the seal, it's a good time to replace it. You can get that from your local bike shop, or bike shops can get it from the distributor, and basically you can see here just by pulling with my fingernail that will pop right out. You pop the new one in and you're good to go. This one actually is in really good shape, so we're going to go ahead and keep this in place. Next step we want to do is use some KS post paste, which is a suspension specific lubrication. Most bike shops can get this for you. If they don't have it or can't get a hold of it, another substitute would be Slick Honey. Try to avoid lithium grease, try to avoid like a marine grease. Those are too thick, too heavy bodied, and they tend to gum up and cause the suspension not to work smoothly. So definitely take the extra time to find the Slick Honey or KS post paste. What we're going to do here is there's a cavity created between the two wiper lips in the seal. We're going to fill that with the grease, and just you go along and just kind of wipe it in there as you work your way around. You're going to fill the cavity, wipe off the excess. We'll go ahead and just set this aside. Okay, our next step is going to be to clean the DU bushing. So again, a little degreaser on our microfiber towel. I'm going to wipe it clean. Okay, so what's important here is we've checked for looseness, made sure that it slides properly. The next thing to check is the actual surface of the Teflon on the DU bushing. And so the Teflon should be smooth, free of any nicks or scratches. If you find any damage here, it's a good time to go ahead and replace this. Again, it's available through your local bike shop or through your local distributor. This one's in very good shape, so we'll go ahead and just reuse this. Okay, so the next step is going to be to go ahead and clean up the shaft here. So we're going to go ahead and clean the stanchion shaft. Cartridge itself is a sealed system, so there's really no need to remove this at this point. If you're having issues with function of the oil cartridge, then you'll want to talk to your local dealer, or if you're a dealer, talk to your distributor about purchasing a cartridge unit. But for the normal maintenance that we're doing here, you really don't need to do anything to this system inside. Okay, so now what we're going to do is go ahead and install our seal collar and seal back on. So we'll slide that into place. Our next step is to slide the DU bushing back on. Then we're going to go ahead and put our 3 guide bushings back in. We'll take a little bit of grease, put that into the groove, install the guide bushing and push down, apply a little bit more grease over the top. What that's going to do is, with pushing it into the grease like that, it's going to create some suction that's going to hold that bushing in place. It's kind of like having a second set of hands. It's going to make the job a lot easier for us when we go to reassemble this. So we'll do the second one here, and then the third one. You want to take care when you're handling this now, because you don't want these bushings to fall out. So just be gentle with it. Go ahead and set that aside. Next step is we're going to go ahead and clean up the inside of the mast. And so the first step, again with some degreaser, which we still have plenty on the rag here, and a microfiber towel, we're gonna go in and clean it. And I'm just doing a back and forth motion all the way around. Okay, so what we're looking for here is for this retainer inside to be bright white color and the rollers in here to be shiny. So once you've accomplished that, you know that everything's clean and it's gonna be ready to be re-lubricated. The last step is we're gonna take a long screwdriver, wrap our towel around it, and push that down inside. What we're looking to do here is clean the inside and the raceways. So those 3 copper guide bushings inside run on a raceway inside. We want to make sure that's clean so that when they're lubricated, everything works smoothly. So we look down and sight down it. Everything looks clean inside, so we're ready to go ahead and lube the bushing, or the roller bearing rather, not the bushing. What we're going to do now is we're going to push the grease down inside with your finger, and what we're trying to do is force the grease down against one side of the roller and have it squirt back out the other side. Once it's doing that, once the grease is actually being pushed all the way through and coming back out, we know that that's fully greased and that it's going to have proper lubrication. So now we're going to take this assembly. What you're going to want to do is hold it with 3 fingers. So I put 2 here, 1 here. You're going to slide it in, and in that retainer on the roller bearing, there's 3 little grooves for these guide bushings to fit in. What I like to do is I like to line it up a little bit to the right of the groove, push the stanchion in, and then that roller clutch is going to let it roll, and I turn it counterclockwise until it drops in. You can see it just dropped in there. As you continue to push, keep your fingers on these bushings because you don't want one to pop out of position. If that happens, it can slide up out of the groove, and as you're pushing it in, you can bind up and either bend or score one of these bushings. So once that goes through, your next step is going to be to thread the collar on. We're going to tighten that by hand and clean it good. Get rid of any of the grease residue. And now after being hand tight, we're going to use our strap wrench and go 1/4 of a turn, and that's tight enough. Flip this around so you can see the other side. Okay, now as we talked about before, this push rod has a rounded end and a square end. The square end goes back inside, the rounded end needs to stick out. So what we're going to do is we're going to put a thin coat of lube on this and install that back into the cartridge. Put a little dollop of grease here. And then I want to show you on this actuator. Generally speaking, this should stay pretty clean because this is going to be inside of the seat tube of the bike. And so you shouldn't have too much dirt or grime buildup on it. If there is, just go ahead and take your microfiber towel and get in there and clean it really good. Once you get it clean, there's a couple surfaces that slide on each other here, and we want to make sure that we get some grease on that. So the first spot you want grease is if you're going inside that hole, is the back side of this first arm that comes down. So we want to lube that, and then if we just push that down, just using the end of the Allen key to get a little dollop of grease, and then you want to put another little dollop inside here because those surfaces slide together a little bit, and so if we grease them, they're going to function a lot better. Okay, our next step is to go ahead and thread this into place. We'll stop it hand tight. We're going to put our axle vise or clamp here to hold it in place. We're going to tighten this 1/8 of a turn, past hand tight. Okay, now our final step is to go ahead and thread the actuator into the mast. In this case, the threads are a little bit snug, so that's why I'm using the wrench to kind of help it along. But once you feel it make contact, or if you're able to thread it by hand, as soon as it touches and it's basically hand tight, We're going to rotate it 1/8 of a turn past hand tight, and that's all that you need. Okay, so your crux eye is now ready to reinstall on your bike.